I'm supposedly a teacher of mindfulness, and mindfulness to me means different things than it does for most people, because I think that the answer to true peace of mind is beyond mindfulness, really. I think it's beyond the human ego mind, and it's into a sort of space that they're calling the 0 point now, and it's a point of balance, but you don't get to it by using the mind. So really, it's a sort of state of mindlessness.
Welcome to Conversation for the Soul. I'm Linda Christine. Well, today you are in for a treat. I had a wonderful conversation with Dr. Joe Delaney. Dr. Joe is actually a mindfulness coach. He does biofeedback, reading off his website here, stress management, but he is an expert on heart coherence on many levels, from the spiritual, mind and body, all of the above. So today we talk with Dr. Joe, and we did a little bit of a different kind of show today. I was guided to do just some random items and put them in a hat. And so we go through and we pull out those random items, anything from his favorite food to what his thoughts are on dragons and breaking down the divine masculine. So it's quite an interesting show. At least I hope you think so. I thought it was a lot of fun to break from regular format and do something a little bit more out of the box, so to speak, or I should say out of the hat. Anyway, let me know what you think. I hope you enjoyed today's show. Please do like, share, and subscribe this if it resonates for you. And here we go with Dr. Joe. I am here today with Dr. Joe Delaney, and we're going to go away from the typical format because Dr. Joe strikes me as someone who is very lighthearted, fun-loving, heart-centered kind of guy. And there's a lot on you out there already. You've done quite a few podcasts. You do your own podcasts, and you've been on quite a few. So I wanted to shake things up a little bit today.
That's good.
So I have
Sounds good to me.
This really cool hat.
Oh, be Jesus.
Took my husband's hat and I put in it some subjects just to pull from the hat, and we will see what comes up. And I would just like for you to talk about the first thing that comes to mind when I read whatever is on one of these papers. How does that sound?
Yeah,
right.
That's fine.
This is going to be fun. This is the first one.
Be afraid, though. Be afraid.
Well, there's only a few little dicey ones in there. The rest of them are pretty legit.
Okay.
This is the first one, mindfulness.
Yeah, mindfulness. I'm supposedly a teacher of mindfulness, and mindfulness to me means different things than it does for most people, because I think that the answer to true peace of mind is beyond mindfulness, really. I think it's beyond the human ego mind, and it's into a sort of space that they're calling the 0 point now, and it's a point of balance, but you don't get to it by using the mind. So really, it's a sort of state of mindlessness, right?
Yes.
And I think what happens is, from a hemispheric point of view, with our left and right hemispheres always knocking hell out of one another, that seems to be the way that it works. I see that the right hemisphere is associated with the feminine and the left with the masculine, not male and female, but masculine and feminine. And I think it's important to sort of differentiate between those two terms. So I think that within all human beings, we have a masculine and a feminine part. All of us do that,
Yes.
And I think the problem is, it's they're always in conflict with one another, and in chaotic circumstances, they're in a state of what's called accentuated antagonism. That means they're in fight and flight all the time. And so cognitivists, if you like, would try and put new ideas in there to say, if this situation arises again, just act in this completely different way. So it's almost like preparing another script just in case, and I think that that's a false method, or my experience over the years has shown me now it's just another sort of pretentiousness, really, and it's guarded and it's defensive. Does this sound all right so far?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious, if you were to be verbally attacked by somebody, where would you go in the mindlessness?
verbally attacked, I just go into my heart, because the heart just sort of dissolves it straight away, really. Because the heart is the solution, and the solution dissolves things, and that's how I see it, really. Because only the ego can be attacked, really. It takes the bait and then it goes into fight or flight. So if you're not attached to ego, right? I mean, I'm still attached to ego, but I feel it come in, like, do we suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune? Yeah, I think that we have to in order to experience and learn things. But it's as the arrow lands is to breathe it away, really, and then settle down again. So most of the time, we don't need to react and respond, even to defend ourselves. We can just basically take no notice.
Yeah, yeah, that's beautiful. And if you were to see a wrongdoing against another, would you step in to assist, or what would you do with your
Depends on the
mindlessness?
circumstances from one moment to the next, really, because in some cases stepping in would be interference, and in other cases it would be the opposite, really. And I think I have to go from one moment to the next, guided by my heart of hearts, which I think is my innate intelligence, which is the I am presence, and all these things, the spirit side of me. And I just tune in with my left ear and I say, do I need to step in here? And sometimes I'll just keep walking, son, leave it alone, nothing to do with you. Or sometimes I'll say, yeah, go in, break it up, and then carry on, you see. So the answer is, from one moment to the next, I don't know what to do until I feel it, really.
And part of that is being in flow, wouldn't you say? Just going with where the heart or the soul is leading you.
Yeah, well, that word we used before we went on, I think it's a state of extemporaneousness, which is a big posh word for meaning, living in the flow from one moment to the next, guided by something that's higher than the human self, right? Which is our real self anyway, and I call that the soul, because a soul to me means the source of unconditional love. But in a way, that's actually not a correct title, because the soul itself has its own agenda, based on its own innate abilities, its own journey, its own curriculum. These are the things that come through my mind. I think, well, that's okay. So I just sort of tap and I say, look, soul, what's the best way to go about this here? Give us a clue. And then I just try and go with that. Do I make mistakes? Yeah, all the time, but I'm not too bothered about it anymore, because my intention is, the only intention I ever set is, thy will, not mine, be done. End of story. I don't even go into trying to work out things, because I think once my head gets involved, it all becomes very complicated, and I can start my emotions feeling churning up. And I think, now I don't need all this.
Yeah. And that's a beautiful reminder, is when you get into that place, to pull yourself back and just go, soul, what do you want me to do here? Drop it back down. Yeah. It's beautiful.
And I think it's simple as well, but you have to go through a whole load of complex and complicated things, don't you, before you get to God. Just keep it simple, for God's sake,
Yeah. All right, we're gonna pull another one.
That was a good one to start with, I think.
Yeah, it was a very good one. All right. How did you meet your partner, and what was your first impression?
I met my partner, my wife, right? I met her at a meeting of like-hearted people. I'm not going to go any further into that one, but it was people who were in a sort of organization, if you like, or fellowship for the same purpose, and we shared the same purpose, was to find the truth of our individual selves. And my first impression was, of course, she's a bit all right.
Just a bit all right.
Yeah, but I've been married 3 times before, you see, and to be quite honest with you, I've done with women, I've done with relationships and stuff like that, but I think soul or spirit had different ideas. And then when I met her, it was like kapow, and I thought, oh, here we go again, So yeah, and we're completely opposite. We don't share any interests whatsoever, except the same purpose is to grow in more understanding of what it's all about, because Catherine, that's her name, Catherine, she doesn't do people whatsoever. She can't be around people. She's supremely sensitive. All she does is animals and plants, because she feels those. They communicate with her, she communicates with them, and that's who she is, and we see eye to eye. I mean, because I love plants and animals and stuff like that as well, so we do share those common things. But as for a focus and you know, we hardly share anything at all in common, right? Complete polar opposites, which I think is probably a good thing, actually.
Well, you know, you share two beautiful things in common, plants and animals. Can't go wrong with that.
No, no. And so cats are our thing. They're the things that keep us together. We've got two rescue cats, one from Cyprus. She's the young one, called Griselda, right? And the other one, a rescue cat, Pumpkin. She's older. She was on her last legs when we found her, you know, and she's recovered and recuperated, and she just basically sleeps and eats all day long and purrs.
You know, that energy from that purr. I have a cat myself, and he will probably make an entrance at some point. He usually has to be involved in whatever I'm doing. But that purr, the vibration of that, it can just bring you into center so quickly, can't it? It's magical.
It doesn't. Pumpkin didn't like me at first. She wouldn't come near me for a long, long time. But now she snuggles in, headbutts me, and then she lies right down now. And when I stroke her all over her body, she purrs really loudly and slobbers all over the place, you know. So she's really happy. But I've tried to record actually her purring, but it never records very clearly, because I think it would be quite therapeutic really for people to listen to that, you know.
It would.
So
It would.
that's something that's on the cards maybe for the future, to try and get some pumpkin purring relaxation sounds.
Pumpkin sound healing.
Yeah.
That would be great. All right, we'll pull another one. See what we get here.
It's good, this. I like this. It's a good thing.
Yeah, it's fun. Divine masculine. Where does that take you?
Well, divine masculine is, I think, his place has been pushed out away by the not so divine masculine, really. And I think for a long, long time, there's been an imbalance, and we're talking millions and millions of years, you know, in the way I feel and see things, that there's been a sort of patriarchal, masculine dominated approach to the way human beings have been living. You know, this is how I see it. And I can see that what's actually happening now, in my view, is that there's a resurgence of the sacred feminine energy, right, which is bringing a sort of a rebalancing back to all humans on the planet. I think there's a massive, great shift in consciousness that's happening, and most people are starting to feel this now. It's almost like a purgatorial effect, which is really resetting the balance. It's much more powerful than a human ego can handle. So people are battered all over the place because they don't know what's going on. But I think as the sacred feminine comes back in a much more nurturing and kindly and intelligent way, because I do feel that the sacred feminine came first before the male. I think it's the other way around than we've been told, really. That's my feeling. And it doesn't matter whether I'm right or wrong, but that's the feeling that I have. And I think the way I see it is that the sacred feminine is coming from the dark, almost like the dark womb. And she's coming out to say, hey, big boy, you know, you've had your play now. You know, it's time to start working in a different way. And I'm going to give you some instructions. So pay attention, follow the lead, and see what goes on. So I think in a way, the divine masculine is coming back as a proper sort of masculine figure, where he's a protector, where he's a worker, because I see this as like Mary and Joseph, really, because Joseph, you know, Saint Joseph, I was born in an Irish Roman Catholic background. I was born on March the 19th, which is Saint Joseph's Day. And when I looked in the prayer book, it says Joseph the worker, you know, and I think that's what the divine masculine's role is, as a protector, a provider. And it's also associated with the external of the human body as well, the muscular system and things like that. So, yeah, I think there's a great big reset happening, not the great reset, but the proper great reset that's happening. And it's happening within the individual, you know. I don't know whether that makes any sense.
No, it makes complete sense. What are like the top few things that you see that need to really shift on the planet to get those roles back in alignment between the divine masculine and feminine?
I think that we have to surrender and let go then to something different. And that's where the mindfulness comes back in, that it's about surrender. And it's not surrendering, you know, it's called surrender to win, really. So I think that we're giving up. Most people are coming to a rock bottom now, where they just can't get their heads around what's going on. So rather than use their so-called intellect to try and work things out and jump from one hemisphere to the next, which will always cause an imbalance, the idea would be to let go of both of those components the masculine and the feminine, and come into the heart. And I see that the heart is representative of what people are calling the golden child, or the Christ self, or whatever, And I do believe, in the recoming of the Christ, I think symbolically it's basically the heart opening up, really. But as the heart opens, and this is a hard one, and this is part of the mindfulness process, as the heart opens, eons and eons of repressed and suppressed energy starts to bubble up. And this is the hard part, because it would be lovely if there was a great big solar flash or an event and everybody was like forgiven for everything. But I don't think it works that way, to be honest with you. I think what actually happens is, as the heart opens up, bubbles of repressed stuff come up, and it feels like negative emotion. But if you can just sit with it and watch it and allow it to dissipate, then the message comes with that as well. But it's difficult, you see. You know yourself, Linda, that when people are in pain, they want to jump in and try and fix it immediately, either, and that's what I did for years. I'm 31 years now in recovery from alcoholism. That's my story and my background. And I tried to take my own life because I just didn't know what to do anymore, And I was in the process, and I should be dead, really. Or put it this way, I should never have a headache for the rest of my life, the amount of medication that I took and tablets. But in that process, what actually happened was I felt myself floating away. And I experienced what can only be described as, and has been, as the peace that passeth all understanding. When time stood, you see, I've got a big thing going up my spine here now. I got like a shivery thing going up my spine. That's go on,
Truth
son.
bumps.
Yeah. Oh, it's massive. It's coming right up my legs, up my spine, out to the top of my head. And that always means to me is, go on, son, tell the truth, So what happened was, I got a sense of that I was knocking on heaven's or hell's door, or whatever door. It was opened. A little sort of head came out to say, "You're not ready yet, right?" Turned around, kicked me up the bottom and said, "You've got work to do." And so from that day on, which was over 31 years ago, from that day on, I've been guided to take action, and other people have seen me taking those actions, and almost not like a leader or a savior or anything like that, but just somebody who's been through the process and is working a different way now in trying to release myself from all these bonds and stuff like that, So that's what's happened to me. And it was a massive, massive thing. For 9 months, I was on cloud nine, and I was going round. I thought I was the second coming myself, you know what I mean? I was touching people, hoping they'd be healed. Honestly, I was that sort of blown away with it and filled with, or this thing was flowing through me. And I could feel the energy coming out of my hands and all that sort of business, and the ego side of me like took hold of it and thought, "Oh, you are the savior, come," and all that sort of thing. Anyway, after 9 months, it all went, and I have a person who helps me called a sponsor, and I rang him up and said, "It's gone," and he said, "Oh, thank God for that." He said, "Everybody's been praying you go back on the drink and everything." He said, "You've been such a pain in the ass." Right. So anyway, he explained to me, he said, "No, Joe," he said, "you've got a touch of what it can be like, but you've got to work step by step to get back to that feeling." And I've still got that feeling in me as a sort of something to sort of relate to or to compare with, So that's how I live my life. I can't even remember what the question was now, but oh yeah. So what should people do? And what we do, we have to surrender and understand, if possible, that there's something deeper within us. See, I don't get my downloads or inspiration from there. They seem to come up from me and emerge, in little bubbles of do this next, or that's what this is about,
Yeah, that's beautiful. And some of the best teachers are those that lead by example, which is what you are doing.
Well, I try to, but I haven't got an idea of, oh, look, I'm being an example here. All I just try and do
but that's the best teacher.
Well,
in my
apparently
opinion.
so, and I'm pretty. I used to tell big complicated stories and all that, but I'm pretty sort of straightforward now, because I can't be bothered working things out anymore, really. I just sort of go with it, really, and it seems to be falling into place. One of the things I did was, and I'll say, when I went through this process of coming out of the other side, I did kneel down actually with the sponsor. And because that was the sort of procedure that people went through. And as I was kneeling down with him, I thought, "Oh God, I'm in a cult here or something," And he said, "Look, Joe," he said, "just say these words after me." He said, "Because I said it, and all the magic started to happen then." Right. So I thought, okay, well, I've got nothing to lose. And he said, say them after me. My creator. I thought, there we go. And I said, my creator. He said, say it loud so I can hear what you're saying. My creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defective character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. Amen. And I felt one of them weird feelings, and I thought, that's a bit strange. Anyway, I left his house then, and I went home. I was living by myself, right? And as I got in, I sat on the bed, and this is no lie. A voice said to me, Joseph, we love you. And I thought, oh my God, I'm on my way back to the psychiatric department here, you know. And I said, I said, F off, you know, I won't say the full word, but I said, F off, leave me alone and come back in the morning when it's light, you know. And then I fell into a deep sleep. And when I got up the next day, my whole perspective and perception of life had changed absolutely, totally. So people have called that a psychic change. And I see that was a sort of a spiritual reawakening for me, you know, and my life has sort of continued one day at a time since then.
Oh, what a beautiful experience. Wow. I love it.
It's great. I didn't know what was going on at the time, but I just see, I go with feelings rather than trying to work it out. Because I remember looking at the news, and I looked at the news and I thought, that doesn't seem to make sense, you know. So everything had shifted in me, really.
Well, that's kind of how it is now. You know,
Absolutely.
It's very rare I get a glimpse of the news, but when I do, I'm like, that's not the world I'm living in. What's happening here?
Yeah. So, and I think that's what humanity's going through. If I could just get the message across, because part of my job is to grow in understanding and effectiveness of passing the message. And the message is, what you're looking for is in there. Stop looking out there. Get in there. Ask, absolutely. Excuse me, if there's anybody in there, give us a clue. And that's basically, we talked about levity, because I see levity is the opposite of gravity. And I spent so long being under the influence of gravity and being miserable. Yes. That I just can't get there anymore, you know.
Levity is so much more fun.
It is.
All right. Let's see what we get next. Got like 10 of them. We might get through them all.
I can talk quicker if you like.
No, you're doing great. You're doing perfect. Just what you should. The Angelic Realm.
Well, oh, there we go again. Look, just got me in the back of the head there. Yeah, that's funny, that, isn't it? You know, under the guardianship of the Holy Guardian Angel, right? Because in my journey, I was introduced to something called the mystical Kabbalah, or the Kabbalah, you know, and which is the ancient Hebrew tree of life, basically, you know, and the spheres of influence. And I was introduced to 2 archangels, because I mean, I was brought up in Roman Catholic, so angels and archangels and cherubim and seraphim and all that were, you know, I knew about them anyway, you know, and I think that they're forces in the invisible realms that do exist. But I think some of them went in the wrong direction for a week or two, or maybe a few million years or two, you know.
Yeah.
And I think what's happened recently in the last couple of years is, I mean, I don't know whether you're familiar with Kabbalah, are you at all?
Just very little, very little.
Yeah. Well, the spheres, there were 10 spheres, or Zephyroth, they're called 10 spheres. And each sphere was a sort of, a direction of consciousness. It was a stream of consciousness. And there was a guardian angel that looked after each of these streams. And within these streams were a particular attribute or skills, you know, but there were also vices and virtues. And if you weren't balanced in them, you could be on the vice side of it. I'll explain it a bit more in a minute. But I was introduced to Sandalphon, the Archangel Sandalphon, who is basically associated with, he's the messenger next to God, really, more or less. And there was also his twin brother, sister, or either or, because I can't quite work out its gender, you know, called Sandalphon. And I have a sort of big resonance with Sandalphon, right? And by the way, I don't follow any religion anymore. I just go with what I feel is correct for me, you know. Yeah. But when I'm sometimes in trouble, I'll intone the word Sandalphon. I'll go Sandalphon, Sandalphon, and as I speak it outwards, I'll also draw it inwards as well. And always, always, this sense of calm descends on me, and I get a picture of, and I see clear pictures sometimes. It's a bit like a great big owl that's got great big wings, and it comes behind me and almost like shovels me along sometimes as well. And when I'm running or when I'm cycling, sometimes if I need a bit of, this is true, this is how my head works.
I
So
love it.
maybe I am back into the psychiatric department, but I feel good about it. But no, I get a sense of, sometimes I get a bit of a shove up, come on, son, you'll be all right, and sometimes it comes round and pulls me back a bit, you see. So it's almost like I'm sort of being guided and guarded and sort of moved in the right direction, So angels and archangels, fine by me. If that's what people live by, that's great. However, I think in the fall from grace, there were some angels who went the wrong way for a bit, but I think that they've been redirected onto the right path again. And what also happened is 2 spheres of consciousness that have been blocked off for such a long time were sort of reconnected again. And so there's 12 actual spheres to this tree of life, And I think that that's also representative of the 12 innate abilities or skills that are, indwelling in all human beings. I think all human beings have the potential to be, to link into 12 aspects of intelligence, and that's something that I'm working on. And in my medical field, I've been shown that the heart is the 13th, that's the Christ, and it's connected to the 12 cranial nerves. And the 12 cranial nerves are representative of the 12 disciples, and the 12 disciples are then linked to the 12 tribes and the 12, so we've got a connection between the nervous system, the meridians, because there's 12 meridians as well, and then it expands out then as well. And I see 12 by 12, 144. So these are all the things that come into my head. I don't fully understand it, to be quite honest with you, because I'm trying to get my work done so I can make some money to pay the rent as well, So from one side, there's all this stuff coming in, but I have to sort of say, you'll have to hang on, because I've got to try and make some money to live, I don't know whether that's making any sense, Linda.
And aren't there 12 strands of DNA too, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So
right.
Yeah, I mean, my mind likes to go and find the puzzle pieces too. And it's interesting. All these things clearly go together in some fashion. You touched upon 2 spheres that are now coming back in. What are those 2 spheres?
I'm not sure exactly, but I think it was to do with the 11th, the 10th and 11th spheres, right? They were the ones that were blocked off, so there was no access, if you like, to the 12th sphere, which is basically the crown of the head. I don't fully understand it, to be honest with you, but I think there's something there that I need to look at into the future.
I'm anxious to hear about that when you tap into that more. All right. Oh, this one jumped out.
That'd be a good one.
Dragons.
Well, don't know whether you do light language, but I do. And apparently I get a dragon that comes through. Wow. And I didn't understand this either until it started to come through, because I've spoken in light language since I was a child, but just thought it was gobbledygook, really. But what's actually happened is the 12 spheres also have the 12 vibrations or tones that are associated with the different language as well. So the dragon to me is the root. It's the root. And again, where I see things in my mind, I used to see a great big huge black dragon with red tipped claws and red eyes, and it used to frighten the daylight out of me when I was drinking. But I realize now, again, it's part of me protection as well, and he also, or yeah, he comes in sometimes to apply the power when it needs to defend myself, if you know what I mean. So I love dragons. I'm very connected to dragons. In fact, I'm wondering where the book is. My wife bought me a fantastic book, dragon book, because my wife did.
You'll have to share that with me, because I'm just now getting into dragons. And long story short, I was doing some breath work during a full moon ceremony with some other people, and I birthed 12 dragons no, 7 dragons. I'm sorry, 7 dragons, each one a color of the chakras.
Fantastic.
And I
Well,
lost it. It was like all my dragon mom maternalness just started pouring out of me.
I have a big link. I see again. I'm getting all these feelings, you know, and stuff. But this one, that comes through a lot.
Wow.
When that came through, I really thought I was losing the plot until I joined some people who spoke in light language, and then we all talked in different ways, you know, and that really brings it deep into me and stuff like that. You know, when I'm driving to work in the car, sometimes it's in, you know, and I'm having a chat with it as I'm driving along. But I don't know, Linda. You know, I'm just like learning like everybody else, and I say, well, what's the purpose of this? It's just to show you, you know, that we're here with you. Just give us a shout if you need any help. Really, excuse me one sec. Takes a bit of practice, that one.
It's all so fascinating, isn't it? And I really hope that we can get some answers before we move on to our next chapter, to find out what is all of this that's coming in, why is it happening, and how is it gonna shift and transpire in the future.
Yeah. Well, Predragon are the stone people, and there's another thing, you know, and I share this with people, you know, there's only a few people I can talk to about these things, you know, and I say, look, I keep getting this, like, it's like the Hulk, but it's made of stone, and it's almost like associated with those things at Easter Island. And I say, I don't know anything about them, but that's that thing I keep getting. And I get, who are you? And they got, we are Predragon. And I think, what do you mean by that? We are the leap before the dragon. So what I get is stone, which is a really dense vibration. There's almost like a quantum leap then into sort of animation. And it was the dragons that came next, you know, and then from there was all sorts of upshifts into different dimensions and different more refinements and increasing frequencies as well, you know.
Wow.
This is why I'm trying to mark scripts and things like that. I'm thinking, leave me alone, just leave me alone.
Oh, isn't it weird? You got to like shift between these two worlds, you know? And
Yeah.
I look forward to the day when we can just be in the world you and I are in right now, you know, and just exist in that without having to worry about where am I going to get the paycheck and how am I going to pay the rent?
Yeah. No, and I think we're moving towards that. I found the last month really, really difficult, to be honest with you, because with a foot in both camps, you know, and I feel like I've been tested to the nth degree, and I still feel like I'm going through that. But I keep getting told this, no, you're just being refined. It's a tolerance thing. We're trying to show you where you're still hanging on to stuff at depth. And think, well, that's very kind of you. Thanks very much. And what I've learned is that if I'm feeling disturbed, now, this is quite an important point that I find anyway. If I'm feeling disturbed, it can't be the divine in me, because that can't get disturbed. So it must be some aspect of ego. Now, there's a conscious part of ego, but there's 4/5 under the surface that are the unconscious aspects and the deeply hidden parts of the ego. And so if I get a tug sometimes, my conscious mind tries to work it out, but it's not really to do with something that this can understand. I've got to sit with it in mindfulness, drop into it, find out where the hook's in, and say to my soul, what is it that you're trying to teach me in this part here? And that's what I get, is that this is nothing. Joe, don't take this personally. You've cleared a lot of your personal stuff. You're working on your ancestors' stuff now. I think, well, thanks very much for that, you know.
Isn't that interesting though? I've found that parts of me that I thought were healed are resurfacing with new aspects to be peeled away.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
really
I
heavy.
don't think any of us have got it cracked or that. I mean, there's a joke that in the organization or fellowship that I belong to is the ego dies half an hour after we do, you know, and I think that's hilarious, that, you know, that as a human being, because I see the human mind body complex to me is the ego, you know, that's the thing. And I think what happens is as we embody, as the soul sort of infiltrates us, if you like, it's sort of working through us. But in order to come out and fully radiate, we've got to go and sort of find out the bits that are obstructing the light, you know, whatever that means. So then we can fully radiate, so that the soul, the divine self, and the human self can work at one perfectly.
That's beautiful. I agree with that. All right, let's see what we got here. Name 3 recent serendipitous moments, or whatever comes to mind.
Yeah, I'm just trying to. I think, you know, every day sort of calamities happen, but then serendipity jumps in quite quickly then to say, do this. So there's sort of so many things. I can't really think of anything. No, nothing coming to mind there. I think it just sort of happens. My life's run now on intuition and inspiration, basically. And I think when the tug comes in, I immediately say, please show me what to do. Do that, look there, turn left, carry on, you know. So serendipity sort of follows me around, I think. And I like serendipity because serendip is Ceylon, you know, and it always reminds me of my dad because my dad was based in Ceylon, or Sri Lanka as it's called now, in the war. So I love that word serendipity because it brings me dad back to my mind. You know?
Oh, that's beautiful. How would you guide somebody into living more in that serendipitous flow?
I teach them a heart-centered technique, which is the breathing, you know, so it's heart-centered breathing. I say, put your hand on your heart, tap like that. So tap like that, get a feeling of where the heart
Does
of
it
your
matter
heart.
which hand?
No, it's whatever feels
Okay.
comfy. So tap like that. Try and feel where your heart of hearts is. So it's almost like use the center of your hand to connect with where you feel your heart of heart is. And if you want to, you could put your other hand on top of that as well. Okay, and then you can do like a snuggly feeling as though you were like snuggling a child or a pet close to you. And then drop your shoulders. And then just focusing on the palm of your hand. Just imagine that you're breathing a nice, gentle, light, wonderful feeling in from the palm of your hand. So it's in, 2, 3, 4, 5. Stop. Out, 2, 3, 4, 5. Stop. And if you do that for 10 minutes, for 3 times a day, your life will change completely. And I can explain the neuroscience of that because it's the feeling, it's the heart-centered breathing, a feeling of positivity that changes the way. I have a phrase that says you can change the way your heart works to change the way your head works. Because what actually happens is as you get into synchronous, coherent breathing, your brainwave patterns change. So we drop from sort of a frantic beta state into what's called an alpha theta state, which is a state of relaxed alertness. So you don't feel sleepy, you feel relaxed, but you're switched on and you've got an open, expanded vision then as well. So that's what I teach people really is heart-centered breathing. And that's the simplicity of it, is that if you want to know the answers, if you get into that feeling, you'll feel a drop. And sometimes I'll say to people, develop then a dialogue with your heart, you know, and they say, what do you mean? I say, just imagine that you've got the source of infinite intelligence deep within you, and you can actually sort of ask it to give you the clue, you know. And so when people get over themselves, then, like I had to, you know, then you develop a sort of relationship with this deeper part of yourself.
You know a lot about the heart, both physically and spiritually.
Yeah, it was my PhD was really the intimate and intricate relationship between the way we breathe and how the heart works. And what I found was that most people breathe between 12 and 15 breaths per minute at rest. If you can drop that down to 9 breaths per minute, what actually happens is your heart power increases, the way your heart works increases, but also the flexibility of your heart actually works. But if you can get down to 6 breaths per minute, which takes a bit of practice, at 6 breaths per minute, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous systems both start to work harmoniously with one another. That to me is what's called the sacred union. And I think that's when the masculine and the feminine start to work in harmony with one another. And that's when we hit the 0 point where the heart then, or the child, or the Christ actually starts to inspire and intuit information, you know. So it's important to understand and feel when you're out of coherence. How do you know you're out of coherence? Because you feel disturbed. Yeah. So that thing about the first thing I need to do if I'm feeling emotionally disturbed is to quell the disturbance, but not by suppression or repression, by closing the throat and pushing it down. It's exactly the opposite way. So it's to open up the throat. It's to allow the heart to express itself. That will bring in the balance. and then make a decision. Because most of us make decisions off the cuff, you know, we make decisions on a sort of rapid automatic thing that's associated with old coping strategies that were basically developed in the first 7 years of life. So really that's the emotional child, you know, getting frightened and just chucking out some sort of an answer. So it's when you can actually self-awareness, when you can feel yourself doing that and go, oh, hang on a second, back you go, down, boy, breathe, calm, think again. That's what I feel helps people. And, you know, you don't have to talk about spirit. You don't have to talk about Christ. You don't have to talk. All you can talk about is resetting the balance, getting to a neutral point and thinking again, you know. And so when I'm talking to sort of medical audiences and stuff like that, I don't mention the woo-woo side of things. I'm just talking in neuroscientific terms, really.
And you, in the past year, have had a physical heart ailment. What awareness came in for you around that?
Loads. First of all, that I'm still an egomaniac and I was driving myself too hard. You know, I wasn't paying attention to what I was saying to everybody else. I don't mind this now because I mean, you know, okay, you know, but what happened was this coming Saturday, a year ago, I do what's called park runs, the local across every week at 9 o'clock across the world. People go to the local parks free of charge and all run around and do 5Ks together. Well, I do that with a load of people. And as I was going there, this great big portal opened up in front of me. You know, perceptually, I saw this great big portal and thought, that's a bit strange. And then I started to see all these lights going on. And I got a funny feeling then. I thought, I'm not quite sure what that is. But anyway, cut a long story short, I did the run, but I didn't feel too good about it. But I completed it, you know, because I wanted to get the T-shirt at the end of it. So I kept going. I kept going like a lunatic man, you know. And that night I felt not very well. And so my wife took me to the hospital. They did an ECG or an EKG, as Americans call it, and it was abnormal, slightly abnormal. But they said, well, we can't find anything really, and they sent me away, you know. But anyway, the week later, tell a long story short, they called me back to say, we've got your blood test results, and it does look like there's something going on there, but we'll send you back to your GP, your general practitioner. Anyway, the week later, it was virtually a replay of it, but this time I had a fully blown one, right? And it took them 6 hours to get me from the emergency department to the specialist hospital. And in that time, I lost over 40% of my heart's capacity. So I'm now classified in the UK in the NHS system as a heart failure now. But I've just put a post up to say I think I'm a heart success, really, right? Because it's taught me really to pay even more attention to my breathing and to pay more attention to the way I'm feeling at the level of the heart. Anyway, with the help of my best friend, who's an exercise physiologist, with the help of the emergency doctors and the people that I work with, I've retrained myself slowly but surely. And last Sunday, I did my 19th marathon, but I didn't run it. Yeah, I didn't run it all the way. I just ran, walked, always keeping an eye on my heart rate. And to be quite honest with you, I've been fitted with an aortic, a stent, not an aortic stent, a coronary stent. Seems to be doing the job really, really well. I'm now off all medication again. My blood pressure's perfectly good. My heart's working a treat, but I'm much, much, much more aware of what's going on now.
Well, our bodies have such a great way of communicating with us if we'll listen. Yeah. You know, it's just the listening part. And then I Dr. Joe Dispenza, that theory of healing yourself through visualization and talking with your body and all of those things, I totally subscribe to that. Yeah,
I mean, Louise Hay, she had this sort of a long time ago, you can heal your what was it, you can heal yourself or something like that. She believed, like I do, that most of the illnesses in mankind are they start off in the spiritual dimension. They're then associated with the way emotions work, and then that manifests. It's the emotional side of our nature that manifests then in either physical health or physical ill health. So emotional. My job really more than anything else now is the neuroscience of emotional health. you know. And I think for a long time, and also linked to that patriarchal thing, is we've swallowed down emotions and we've not been honest about expressing how we really feel from one moment to the next. And I don't mean kicking off and, you know, I mean being honest with the way we feel. Another phrase I have is, I don't know, I'll go on, though. I usually ask me a question, I can hardly stop, you know, but I have another phrase that if something's playing on your mind, best get it off your chest, you know.
Yeah.
And that's what I really feel.
Yeah.
And so I try and help health professionals to basically ask questions in a certain way where patients can actually express themselves in their own words, you know, and express themselves in their own metaphors as well. Because I think part of my job is to help and listen to people make sense of their own metaphors. I don't need to understand what it means to them as long as they understand what it means to them. That's where I think the magic is, really.
Yeah. And I like that you brought up the part about the ancestors too, because I went through stage 3 colon cancer back in 2013. And there was a lot that I learned from that. It was a beautiful teacher for me to get me to shift my whole life and my perspective and the way I behaved, all of it. And then recently, again, it came up for examination that the stomach area holds anger. And there was anger that needed to be dealt with from past lives that I needed to go back and address, because it wasn't just what I was dealing with in this lifetime. It was other lifetimes that I had to go back and go, so much anger was brought in from that and from this. And it's amazing how that stuff can just carry over with you.
Yeah, and I'm not sure whether it's ancestral or it's personal, and it's all. I don't get into all understanding of that, and whether it's a different timeline, this and everything's happening at the same. I don't know, and I've got no time to try and sit down and work it out. But I sort of have a sense of that what DNA is actually is just crystallized behavior from the past, whether it be ours as personal or relived lives, or whether it actually be ancestral stuff. I don't know. But I've got a feeling from a Buddhist perspective, I'm not a Buddhist, but they say that in order to be free, we need to get back to the original smiling face of the universe. So I think I see that the Big Bang really was a great big grin, you know, or an expression. And I think that we're all being sort of guided, not forced as such, but guided pretty strongly to start to look deeply and go backwards and deeper and clear up all that gunge as well. And I think as we do that individually, everybody benefits at the same time, because there's almost like a sort of a resonance wave that goes out. So the more individuals clean up their own act, the more everybody else benefits as a consequence of it, really.
Very well said. All right. We have 3 more.
Okay.
Let's see. Dark Night of the Soul. I feel like we've covered a lot of that.
Yeah, I have one of those every morning. I thought the Dark Night of the Soul was just a one-off thing, you know what I mean? But I don't see that anymore. But, you know, my darkest night of the soul is when I tried to take my own life, and I really made a good job of it. And, you know, I'd gone through years and years and years of going downhill, not understanding, because people used to say to me, Joe, you're such a clever, you've got all these qualifications. Why can't you pull yourself out of it? And I used to think, yeah, why can't I pull myself out of it? What's the matter with me? And that's because I was trying to use my so-called intellect, or if you like, me cognitive capability. I was trying to think my way out of situations that were spiritual, you know, and emotional rather than cognitive, you know. So I know that I was always trying to pretend that I had it sorted and I was brave and I could do this, that, and the other. And drink helped me to do that for a long time. It helped me to anesthetize myself from my own destructive tendencies, you know. So Dark Nights of the Soul, yes, they could be called. I see that mankind is going through almost like a collective, and there's a global crucifixion going on. And I see that in that sense, that the crucifixion is when you get to a point where you hit rock bottom. And I see rock bottom is actually the ceiling to the next dimension. So there's a paradoxical thing. And I think a shift comes in. So when you hit rock bottom, it's almost like there's a sort of a drill going through into the next dimension. But you can only get there by surrendering, you know. And when you surrender, you know, what happens is you go, whoop, and you think, oh God, should have done that years ago, you know. So my thing about just sitting and waiting for Godot is important, but you've got to get to the point where you've tried absolutely everything to think your way out of things, and then realize that there's a different place to look for the answer. So rock bottoms, yeah, they're real. It's just another word, I know. Not rock bottom, but dark nights of the soul.
Yeah.
Very important. And I think what we do with medication and drink and drugs and all sorts of things, we try and distract ourselves away from the steps that need to be taken, you know. And I think people are being forced now that the truth will set them free, but it cuts both ways now, and it hurts like hell until you let go.
What, and I don't know if you have looked into this at all, but what are your thoughts on psilocybin in helping with all of those addictive type problems and opening up the spiritual realm?
I've tried virtually everything on the planet, and I know that a lot of these things work, but to me, they're indications, but they need to be let go of, and people need to get back to natural ways of getting to that frequency as well, you know. So I think, you know, there's lots and lots and lots of gurus in India who are wrecked off their head all the time, who are linked into the spiritual realms, but it's a chemically induced state, and therefore it doesn't feel correct to me. That's not a judgment. All I'm saying is, to me, I know that I've got to be clean and sober. And I know there's even an eating aspect there, that even what we eat can actually affect the way that we think, you know. So I try and keep as clean as possible. I'm sort of tuned into what I'm eating. We filter our water, you know, even the chemicals we use. I'm not sort of paranoid about it, but I'm switched on to it, really. So my suggestion would be, I think that drink and drugs and all those things, they give you an indication. But if you haven't got the drink and the drugs, then you'll sort of come back to the level where you're really at, rather than sort of chemically getting the. I don't know whether I've answered that very clearly, but
No,
cleanliness is next to godliness, whatever that means.
and it's so challenging because everything is full of toxins these days. To try and avoid it is crazy.
Yeah.
So challenging. All right.
Oh yeah.
2 more.
Jolly good.
Heart coherence.
Yeah. It's my whole field, really, sort of heart coherence. So it's really heart brain coherence, but mind body coherence. Because to me, everything's connected. It's just that we've forgotten about all the connections, you know. And I think once you start to see that everything's connected in this unified field, you know, you can sense your way through it. So my life is led by my heart now, and I try and explain this to people. And if you're in your head, you can't understand what I'm talking about. Basically,
Right.
it's just, you know, and it's. I used to try and convince people to say, don't you know what I'm talking about? And they go, I haven't got a clue, you know. And I'll say, here, come here, put your hand on your heart, do that. And they go, oh, what's that feeling? And I'll say, that's what it is. But then they forget about it then. Anyway, heart coherence, yeah. My PhD is about heart rate variability. And I've measured thousands upon thousands of ECGs, EKGs on people in various states, in various disease conditions. And it's led me into the understanding that, like Buddha's reputed to have said, if there's a quick shortcut to anything, is just become aware of your breathing. Because the way that we breathe, it's mediated by the vagus nerve, which to me is a representative of the sacred feminine. And I think the sacred feminine has been pushed down over years by the sympathetic nervous system, which is the masculine. And I think what's happening now is, as this great shift in consciousness is coming through, the vagus is reactivating, and it's causing all these things in the body. So the idea would be is not for the vagus now to take over and dominate, but it's actually to let go of both sides and allow them to resettle by themselves, really. And I think that that's what's happening. So rather than try and analyze and work it out, it's just to sort of be honest about your feelings and try and go with your feelings, really.
I love it. All right, here's our last one. And it's funny how spirit leaves the fun one for last. Favorite food and why?
Funnily enough, I'm not a vegetarian, I'm not a vegan, but vegetables are my favorite food. I love vegetables. But I also love gravy as well, you know, and I don't eat much meat now, but if I eat any meat, it'll be white fish and chicken. That's what I eat now. And my wife's a vegetarian, vegan, you know, and when I'm eating meat, sometimes she looks over as if I have to go and eat by myself sometimes, you know what I mean?
Just like turn and take a
one of
bite.
those, like, she said that was living once upon a time. I said, I know, yeah. So you want to find out, how can you find out, right, if somebody's a vegan, you know, they tell you. But anyway, that's another joke, that's another story. Yeah, my favorite food, it depends from one day to the next, really. I haven't got a favorite food. I used to be really addicted to chocolate and drinking loads of coffee, but that seems to have sort of balanced out a bit now. So I would say vegetables, not so much fruit. We have a thing in the UK, you know, five a day, where you have to have certain amounts of fruit and a certain amount of vegetables, but I don't do much fruit because I find it too sweet, really.
Yeah.
So yeah, veggies, but I'm not off meat yet, and if it's gonna go, it'll go of its own accord.
Yeah.
Picked out by spirits. That's the way I think, because I've still got one of those sort of get away from me heads on me, that if someone tries to tell me and get me to do something, I've still got that rebellious thing that does it more than just to get on their nerves, you know.
I think souls can be stubborn sometime. I think I have one that's very stubborn.
Yeah, me too. And I think, thank God for that, really, you know, because I was like a submissive people pleaser all my life, and I'm definitely not like that now, you know. You know, people used to ask me a favor, you know, will you do this for me? And before I even knew what it was, I'd be saying yes, you know. And now I just say no, do it yourself.
I love it. I love it. This was such a wonderful conversation, Dr. Joe. I appreciate you, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you for asking me, Linda. It's lovely to meet you. I do see some of your stuff up, you know, and I think, oh, there she is. Yeah.
There I am, popping in every once in a while. Well, I appreciate this. I'd love to do it again sometime.
Anytime you like, and maybe I'll get you on my show sometime.
Oh, that would be wonderful.
See how the mop flops.
I like it. All right. All right, sir. I will let you go. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I appreciate everyone joining us here.
Thank you, Linda. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet
Toodaloo,
you.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.